outside.
Hi, my name is Peyton Martinez, and what I'd like to show you today is the Kodak DCS-420. This is a camera that I've been working with since April of 2025, and it's become one of my favorites in my collection. Built as far back as 1995, this is one of the earliest DSLRs you can get your hands on, and originally cost up to $15,000. But today, you can find these for a little more than a couple hundred at most. Despite that, they're still some of the most fun cameras to use, particularly because the experience shooting with them is as close to a 35mm camera as you can get, because it's just a 35mm camera. Let's get into it in more detail. So I originally found out about the whole Kodak line of cameras from the channel Snappiness. He did a video on the DCS-760, and I thought the idea of a film camera turned into a digital camera is just one of the coolest things ever. So I went out looking for one, and I found one on Mercari for 130 bucks. But it's not the same as the one that he had. Those 760 models are pretty rare, and they're pretty hard to come by. But some of the older models, particularly the DCS-420, which is what I have here, are actually pretty commonly available. So what's interesting about this camera too is I think the reason it's in such pristine condition is it was actually bought straight from a plastic surgeon in Miami. What he was doing with it, I'm not quite sure, but from what he told me, he had this in operation for a number of years just on a tripod, and once they got something better, this just went into a box and then eventually into a storage unit. And what's so nice about the fact that it was owned from someone like him was he actually went through all the effort to keep all the original paperwork. So yeah, so I pretty much got everything that this camera would have come with originally, which is a really unique opportunity. It really helped to learn the differences with this camera over something like today, because there are a lot of huge differences you have to take into account if you want to shoot with something like this. Let me show you what it's actually like to shoot with. I'm starting with a landscape shot with SeaWorld San Diego out in the distance there. For all these photos, I'm shooting with a Sigma 28 to 70mm lens. One of the first things to note about this old Nikon is it's compatible with any f-mount lenses, though that is with an asterisk. You have to account for the cropped sensor, which is actually smaller than even APS-C. Basically, wide angles are a must for this camera because the crop is so small. Alright, now I'll be the first to admit none of the photos I've shown so far have been particularly interesting. There's not a lot of color separation, and there's also a lot of color banding. Any sharp edges seems to have this strong rainbowing effect. I think it's safe to say the DCS-420 isn't particularly good at landscape scenes. In fact, some of the photos I've shown you so far look even worse straight out of the camera. If I show you the raw photos, you'll see that they're actually largely violet. Now this is a result of the older sensor technology at the time, which had much more of a preference for infrared light. Now I've actually been shooting all these photos with a Tiffin hot filter, which was actually what they recommended you use at the time, but even with this added level of filtering, any scene out in the sun will just completely blow out. So in direct, bright daylight, this camera just isn't happy. Doesn't matter how fun a camera is to shoot with, if the photos that come out of it are never interesting, what's the point? I found that where this camera really shines is where you use its limitations to its advantage. Out by the beach was this yellow car I thought looked interesting, so I got close and took another shot. Straight out of the camera, it's okay. But if you select those violet tones and bring them up to a blue, the overly blown out and low resolution nature of the camera kind of works to its advantage to create this almost dithered effect, which I really like. These are the kind of scenarios that I've really found myself enjoying using this camera. Not just landscapes, but these darker, high contrasty scenes where you can really push the color output of the camera in some interesting ways. At the end of my ride, when I made it back home, I was lucky enough to be graced with a sunset that really set things off for the rest of this video. When you give this camera color and not too much natural light, it really sees color. These images are hardly edited. This is more or less how they came out straight from the camera. All in all, I've enjoyed it the most for what it does in scenes of high contrast. If you give it some bright light, the images will really pop. And even when the lighting's not in your favor, if you just bring up the contrast and separate the colors as much as you can, you get this really glitchy look, which you wouldn't want on a nice camera, but on something like this, it's fun, with pixelated edges that give it its own character. In fact, kind of in the same vein as film to my eye. It's definitely not for everyone, but I love it specifically for these reasons. Now, shooting with this camera is one thing. Getting the photos off is a whole nother can of worms. The biggest of which being that they use PCMCIA hard drives, actually. This is literally a spinning hard drive that you put into the camera. What they had to do before, more widespread flash technology is use mediums like this. So I would have liked to use a flash medium with this camera, but the other unfortunate thing is specifically some of these older models from pre-1995 or so have a lot of problems with working with flash media. You can get a flash card formatted in this camera, but the problem that I've found is basically it's missing something with a flash card, so it'll constantly give you reading errors, like it can't initialize the drive. So every time it does that, you'll basically have to pop the card out and then pop it back in again, and then it'll just work. It'll save photos and you can open up the photos fine. So it technically works, but if you want to shoot with a flash card on some of these earlier models, you have to literally pop it out and pop it in every time you turn this on. And this thing falls asleep after 10 seconds too, so you almost have to still use these hard drives, and that's pretty much what I have been using exclusively on this camera for the more reliable, normal experience. Every time you take a photo, this drive will boot up and then save the file. But saving the file is only part of the problem. How do we actually get it onto our computer? For that, there's a couple different ways you can go. The first of which being to read the card directly. And to do that, you're going to need an older computer. Something 32-bit with a 2-bay PCMCIA card slot from the Windows XP era. You'll see why later. I'm using this vintage HP laptop that has more than enough ports. Now, if you intend to edit the photos on your modern computer, you're going to need an extra piece of software called DCS File Converter. The Kodak style of formatting for these TIFF files isn't exactly standard, so darkroom apps like Lightroom and Raw Therapy won't be able to open the files as is. You need to use this software to convert them to something those will like. This is the biggest reason you want a laptop from the Windows XP era, as you need something that can run this software, but also has that 2-bay PCMCIA slot you need to read the drive. It is, however, totally free and still available on nikonweb.com. Once everything's been converted to a compatible file format, all you have to do now is drag everything onto a flash drive and open it up on your modern computer. One of the other big things to take into consideration is these have fully internal NiCad packs from the factory. I'll put some pictures up on the screen now, but basically I had to take it apart, figure out how everything was wired together, and create a new nickel metal hydride pack. And there are obviously no pre-made solutions to repair this camera, so that's another big consideration. But I think one of the biggest reasons I enjoy shooting with this camera is actually because it's basically just a film camera. I mean, you're getting the full film experience because this camera literally can be removed. This Nikon series was one of the first to actually save metadata about the photos. Kodak basically is using that functionality of that metadata to tell this digital back when to fire and what ISO it should be in, you know, etc., etc. So the two are actually digitally communicating through a synchronous system on that port on the front. So if you want to take this thing apart and use it as a 35mm camera, it's literally as easy as undoing this, undoing the battery plug that goes in here. You obviously need a new battery tray for AA batteries for this, and then undoing the screw right here for the tripod mount, and it just comes right off, and then you just have this separate digital back. So yeah, all in all, I think this thing is a lot of fun to shoot with, and if you can get a hold of one for cheap, and if you have the adequate electronics knowledge to work with it, it's a joy to work with. And I mean, if you don't, I mean, just look at this thing. Doesn't this look cool on a shelf? Especially with a lens in it. I've just got it with the cover on right now, but you know, I mean, it's just such a cool piece of early technology that this was where they had to take things to get a digital photo in 1995. I hope you enjoyed my little rambling session on this camera. I mean, I've had all this stuff on my mind for a really long time, and I just thought I'd make a proper little tech showcase. I made like a kind of abstract video talking about this camera. I'll have a link to it in the description, but this is my first time talking to the camera about something I'm passionate about, so I had a lot of fun shooting with this, and I hope you had fun learning more about it. So with that being said, have a good one. I'll see you in the next one.